You want to know how it feels to watch a man be erased from his own life? To see someone who built everything, who gave everything, who sacrificed everything, treated like garbage in the house he paid for? Then sit down and listen, because what I'm about to tell you will make your blood boil. This is about my grandfather, and this is about betrayal so deep, so vicious, so calculated that when I tell you what happened, you're going to feel rage in places you didn't know could feel rage. Let me paint you a picture of a Tuesday morning in early March 2023. Just an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day where nothing special is supposed to happen, the kind of day where you drink your coffee, read the paper, maybe water the garden. Normal, peaceful, quiet. Except this Tuesday, my grandfather's life was about to be destroyed. He was sitting in his favorite chair, the brown leather recliner that he'd had for 23 years, the one with the worn armrest where his hand had rested 10,000 times, the one positioned perfectly by the window so he could see the oak tree he planted when my father was born, his chair, in his house, in the home he built with his own two hands. And that's when his son, my father, walked in with that woman. That vicious, calculating, cold-blooded woman he married, my stepmother. And I use that term loosely because she never mothered anyone. She consumed, she plotted, she destroyed. Dad, we need to talk. 4 words, that's all it took. 4 simple words, but the way he said them, you could hear it. The decision had already been made. This wasn't a conversation. This was an execution. My grandfather looked up from his newspaper. 78 years old, still sharp as a tack, still reading without glasses, still strong enough to chop his own firewood every winter. This man wasn't frail, he wasn't senile, he wasn't a burden, but that's exactly what they were about to call him. We've been thinking, my father continued, and isn't that rich? We've been thinking, like they'd been pondering some great philosophical question, like they'd been wrestling with moral dilemmas. They'd been thinking, all right, they'd been thinking about how to get him out of the way so they could have everything. This house is too big for you now. You're getting older. You need to be somewhere with people who can take care of you. Take care of him. Take care of him. This man who had been taking care of himself, taking care of them, taking care of everyone around him for 8 decades. This man who still mowed his own lawn, who still drove himself to the grocery store, who still remembered everyone's birthday and sent cards with handwritten notes. He needed to be taken care of. My grandfather just sat there, quiet, calm. His hands folded over the newspaper in his lap, and he looked at his son, really looked at him, with eyes that had seen war, poverty, loss, triumph, and now this, the ultimate betrayal. Where exactly do you think I should go? Asked. His voice was steady. No tremor, no fear, just a simple question, and that's when she spoke up. My stepmother, her voice dripping with fake concern like honey laced with arsenic. We found a wonderful facility, Dad. It's very nice. They have activities, other people your age, you won't be lonely anymore. Lonely. He wasn't lonely. He had his garden, his books, his woodworking shop in the garage, his weekly poker game with friends he'd known for 50 years, his volunteer work at the community center. He had a life, a full life, a meaningful life. But to them, he was just lonely. Just a sad old man taking up space in a house they wanted. A facility, my grandfather repeated slowly, like he was tasting the word and finding it bitter. You mean a nursing home? It's an assisted living community, my father corrected, like the terminology made it better. Like calling a cage a habitat makes it less of a cage. I don't need assistance, my grandfather said simply. Dad, you're almost 80. You can't keep living alone in this big house. What if you fall? What if something happens? We worry about you. Lies. All lies. They didn't worry about him. They worried about themselves. They worried about the inheritance. They worried about the property values. They worried that if he lived too long, there wouldn't be enough left for them to devour. I'm not alone, my grandfather said. This is my home. I built this house. Your mother and I built this life. Everything you see, I made, and I'm not leaving. The temperature in the room dropped. You could feel it. The pretense, the fake concern, the manufactured sympathy, it all evaporated, and what was left was cold, hard greed. Actually, Dad, my father said, and his voice changed. Got harder, got colder. We've already made the arrangements. We've put a deposit down. They're expecting you in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? My grandfather's voice finally showed emotion, shock, disbelief. You've already decided this without talking to me? We're talking to you now, my stepmother said, and the mask had completely fallen off. No more fake sweetness, just irritation that he wasn't cooperating. We've looked at your finances. We've consulted with the facility. We've worked out all the details. This is what's best for everyone. Everyone, she meant them. This was what was best for them. I'm not going, my grandfather said firmly. My father sighed. One of those long theatrical sighs designed to make it seem like my grandfather was being unreasonable, like he was being difficult, like he was a stubborn child who didn't know what was good for him. Dad, this isn't optional. We've already started the paperwork. The facility needs confirmation by the end of this week. They have other people waiting. Then let them wait, my grandfather said, because I'm not going anywhere. And that's when my father played his trump card, or what he thought was his trump card. The house is going to be put up for sale. We've already talked to a realtor. With the market the way it is, we should get a good price. The money will more than cover the facility costs, and what's left will be managed properly. Managed properly by them. Of course. My grandfather sat there for a long moment, just breathing, just thinking. And when he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet, so calm, so eerily peaceful that it should have terrified them. You think this house is yours to sell? It wasn't a question. Not really. It was something else. Something that should have made them pause, should have made them think, should have made them realize they had just made a catastrophic mistake. But they were too blinded by greed to hear the warning in his words. Dad, we've talked to lawyers. We know your situation. At your age, with your medical history, it's really better if we handle these things. We're trying to protect you. Protect him. From what? From his own life? From his own choices? From his own dignity? My grandfather stood up slowly, not because he was weak, but because he was choosing his movements carefully, deliberately. He folded his newspaper, set it on the chair, and looked at both of them. Get out of my house. Simple, direct, clear. Dad, you're not understanding. Get out of my house, he repeated louder this time. Now. My father and stepmother exchanged glances. The kind of glances that said they'd expected this, that they'd planned for this, that this was all part of their script. We'll give you some time to think about it, my father said, backing toward the door. But Dad, this is happening. One way or another, this is happening. We're doing this for you. And they left. They actually left him standing there in his own living room in the home he built and told him he was being evicted for his own good. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what they couldn't have known because they'd stopped actually seeing him years ago. They saw an old man, an obstacle, a problem to be solved. They didn't see the steel in his spine, the sharpness in his mind, the absolute fortress of will that had carried him through 80 years of life. And they definitely didn't hear what he said next, after they'd walked out, after the door had closed, after they'd driven away, probably congratulating themselves on handling that so well. My grandfather walked to the window, looked out at that oak tree, the one he'd planted 54 years ago, the one that had weathered storms, droughts, freezes, and still stood strong. And he smiled, not a happy smile, not a warm smile, a smile that knew things, a smile that had already moved 5 steps ahead, a smile that understood exactly what game was being played and exactly how to win it. You just made the biggest mistake of your lives, he said to the empty room, and you don't even know it yet. Now let me take you back, because you need to understand who this man is. You need to understand what he built, what he gave, what he sacrificed. Because without that context, you can't fully appreciate the absolute monstrousness of what they tried to do to him. My grandfather was born in 1945, post war America, the kind of poverty that people today can't even imagine. His father had died in the war, never came home from France, left his mother with 3 kids and no life insurance, no pension, no safety net, just grief and bills and mouths to feed. He was the oldest. 8 years old when his father died, and he became the man of the house overnight, not by choice, by necessity, by survival. While other kids were playing baseball and collecting comic books, he was working. Paper route at 5 in the morning, sweeping floors at the grocery store after school, doing odd jobs on weekends. Every penny went to his mother, every single penny. He didn't get a childhood, he got responsibility. At 16, he dropped out of high school. Not because he wanted to, not because he was failing, but because his mother got sick. Pneumonia. In those days, you got pneumonia, you might not make it. She needed medicine. She needed care. She needed someone home. So he quit school and got a job at the factory, full time. 40 hours a week, sometimes more, making barely enough to keep the lights on and food on the table. He was 16 years old, doing the work of a man, carrying the weight of a family with no one to help him. No government programs, no safety nets, just work or die. Those were the options. He kept that job for 8 years, worked his way up from the floor to shift supervisor, saved every penny he could. And when his youngest sister graduated high school, when his mother was stable, when he'd done his duty to his family, he finally let himself breathe. He was 24 years old. Most guys his age were already married, already had kids, already had lives. He had calluses and an 8th grade education and a work ethic that would put anyone to shame. But he also had a dream. He wanted to build things, real things, houses, buildings, something permanent, something that would last. So he became a carpenter's apprentice, started from the bottom again, learned the trade, learned it right, and he was good at it, really good. The kind of good where people started asking for him specifically, where contractors wanted him on their crews, where builders trusted him with their most important projects. By 28, he had his own crew. By 30, his own small construction company. Nothing fancy, nothing huge, just honest work, done well, on time, on budget. And that's when he met my grandmother. She was a secretary at one of the companies he contracted with. 26 years old, smart, beautiful, kind, the kind of woman who saw past the rough hands and the sawdust and the lack of formal education. She saw the man. The good man, the strong man, the man who kept his word and worked until the job was done. They were married 6 months later, small wedding. Nothing fancy, just family and close friends. But it was real. It was love. The kind of love that builds a life together, not just shares one. And they did build. Oh, they built first. They saved for a down payment on land. It took them 3 years of living in a tiny apartment, eating cheap meals, sacrificing every luxury. But they did it. They bought 5 acres outside of town, trees, a creek, a view of the mountains in the distance. Then he built their house. Not hired someone to build it. He built it with his own hands, every board, every nail, every pipe, every wire. He did it right. He did it to last. He did it with love. My grandmother was pregnant with my father when they moved in. She was 7 months along, and he carried her over the threshold of the house he'd built for her, promising her it would stand for 100 years. He was 33 years old. He owned his land. He owned his house. He owned his business. He'd built everything from nothing, from poverty, from loss, from sheer determination and will. My father was born in that house in 1978, in the bedroom upstairs, the one with the window facing east so the morning sun would warm it. And my grandfather, this man who'd never had a father to teach him, who'd never had a role model to follow, who'd never had anyone show him how to be a dad, he was determined to be the best father he could be. He worked hard, ran his construction company, took on projects, built houses, garages, additions, renovations. His reputation grew. People trusted him, people recommended him. He was never rich, but they were comfortable, more than comfortable. My grandmother managed the books, kept the accounts, made sure the bills were paid and the taxes were filed. They were a team, a partnership, the kind of marriage that people write songs about. My father never went without, never felt poverty, never felt hunger, never felt the weight my grandfather had carried as a child. And that was intentional. My grandfather made sure of it, made sure his son had everything he'd never had, Christmas mornings with actual presents, birthday parties with friends, school supplies that weren't secondhand, clothes that fit and weren't patched, trips to the lake in summer, a bicycle when he turned 10, a car when he turned 16. My grandfather gave him the childhood he'd never had, and when my father graduated high school in 1996, when he said he wanted to go to college, my grandfather didn't hesitate. "What do you want to study?" he asked. "Business," my father said. "I want to learn about business." So my grandfather paid for it, worked extra jobs, took on bigger projects, made sacrifices, again, always making sacrifices. 4 years of college, room and board, books, tuition, everything. My grandfather paid for all of it, tens of thousands of dollars, money he could have used to expand his business, to retire earlier, to travel with my grandmother. But no, he invested it in his son, in his son's future. My father graduated in 2000 with a business degree, debt-free. While his friends were starting their adult lives already drowning in student loans, my father had a clean slate, a fresh start, all because of my grandfather's sacrifice. "What are you going to do now?" my grandfather asked at the graduation dinner he'd paid for at the nicest restaurant in town. "I'm going to start a business," my father said. "I have some ideas. I just need some capital to get started." And my grandfather, without hesitation, without conditions, without contracts or lawyers or demands for equity, gave him $50,000. $50,000 he'd saved over decades of hard work. Just handed it over to his son. "Make me proud," he said. That was the only condition. "Make me proud." My father started a property management company, buying small rental properties, fixing them up, renting them out. It was slow at first, a lot of work, a lot of headaches. But my grandfather helped with the repairs, helped with the renovations, worked for free on weekends and evenings, teaching my father everything he knew about construction, about quality work, about doing things right. The business grew. My father bought more properties, hired staff, expanded. Within 10 years, by 2010, he had a small empire, 20 rental properties, a management company handling 50 more for other owners. He was successful, wealthy, set for life, all because my grandfather had given him the foundation, the education, the capital, the knowledge, the support. And my grandfather never asked for anything back, never asked for equity in the company, never asked for a return on his investment, never asked to be repaid. He was just proud that his son had made something of himself, proud that his sacrifices had meant something. But then my father met her, the woman who would become my stepmother, and everything changed. My mother, my real mother, had died in 2012 when I was 12. Cancer, fast and cruel. She was gone 6 months after diagnosis. My father was devastated. We all were. But my grandfather, he lost his daughter-in-law, his partner in crime, the woman who'd been like a daughter to him for 20 years. My grandmother had died 2 years before that, in 2010. Heart attack, sudden. One day she was gardening, the next day she was gone. My grandfather had grieved quietly, deeply, but he'd carried on. He'd had to. He'd had family that needed him, but losing my mother too, that was hard, really hard. The house felt empty. The family dinners stopped, the holidays became quiet. We were all just trying to survive our grief. My father threw himself into work, which I understood. Grief makes people cope in different ways, and for 2 years he just worked, focused on the business, built more, acquired acquired more, made more money. And then in 2014, he met her at some business conference, some seminar about property investment. She was working there, not attending, working, coordinator or assistant or something. 20 years younger than him, beautiful in that calculated way. The kind of beauty that's all makeup and hair dye and gym memberships and strategic outfits. They started dating, which was fine. My father deserved to be happy again, deserved to find companionship. No one begrudged him that. But from the start, something was off about her. The way she looked at things, the way she asked questions about the business, about the properties, about the finances, the way she tallied things up in her head when she thought no one was watching. My grandfather saw it immediately. He'd lived too long, seen too much, not to recognize a predator. "Son," he said carefully one day, "take your time with this. Make sure you know who she really is." But my father was lonely, and she was attentive, and she said all the right things, made him feel young again, made him feel desired, made him feel like life wasn't over. They were married 8 months later in early 2015. Quick wedding, fancy venue, expensive everything. My grandfather paid for half of it, even though he had doubts, even though he saw the red flags, because he loved his son, because he wanted his son to be happy. And at first, she played the role perfectly. Sweet daughter-in-law, always smiling, always polite, always asking my grandfather how he was doing, if he needed anything, telling him how wonderful he was. But then came the suggestions. Little suggestions, innocent-sounding suggestions. "Dad, that house is so big for just you. Have you ever thought about downsizing? Dad, you're still working so hard on the properties. Don't you want to retire? Enjoy your golden years? Dad, you should really think about estate planning. Make sure everything is organized. We could help you with that." My grandfather wasn't stupid. He knew what she was doing, sizing up the estate, calculating the inheritance, planning the takeover, but he said nothing. Just watched, just waited, just noted every little reveal of her true character. The suggestions became more direct, the politeness became thinner, the mask started to slip. "We should really talk about you adding our names to the house deed, just for legal purposes, just to make things easier if something happens to you. We've been thinking you should sign over some of the business assets. For tax purposes, our accountant says it would be smart. Maybe we should have power of attorney, just in case, just to protect you." Every conversation was a grab. Every interaction was a manipulation. Every visit was a calculation, and my father went along with it. That's what killed my grandfather the most, watching his son, the boy he'd raised, the man he'd shaped, just nod along to this woman's schemes. "She's just trying to help, Dad," my father would say. "She's just looking out for us, for the family." The family. Like my grandfather wasn't family. Like he was an outsider that needed to be managed, contained, controlled. The visits became more frequent and not friendly visits. Investigation visits. They'd walk through the house, pointing at things, discussing things, making plans like he wasn't even there. This room would make a great home office. We could knock out this wall, open up the space. The kitchen definitely needs updating. Everything's so outdated. They were redecorating his house in their minds, planning renovations for when he was gone or when they forced him out. My grandfather would sit in his chair and listen to them dismantle his life in hypotheticals. The house he'd built, the home he'd shared with my grandmother, the place where they'd raised their son, the walls that held 50 years of memories. To them, it was just real estate, just square footage, just market value. The disrespect escalated slowly, methodically, like a frog being boiled. If it happened all at once, it would have been obvious, but they were smart. They did it gradually. First, they stopped asking before they came over, just showed up, walked in like they owned the place. Then they started moving things, reorganizing the kitchen, cleaning up the garage, helping by throwing away things they deemed unnecessary. My grandfather's tools got moved. His woodworking projects got shifted. His books got rearranged. His space got invaded bit by bit. We're just trying to help, Dad. A place was getting a little messy. It wasn't messy, it was lived in, it was his. But they were establishing dominance, showing him that his preferences didn't matter anymore. Then came the criticisms. Gentle at first, concern trolling disguised as care. Dad, you're looking tired. Are you sleeping okay? Dad, did you forget we talked about this? We discussed this last week. Dad, you're repeating yourself. You told us this story already. They were building a narrative, planting seeds, making him doubt himself, making others doubt him, setting the stage for the claim that he was declining, that he wasn't capable, that he needed intervention, but he wasn't declining. His mind was sharp. His memory was perfect. He knew exactly what they were doing. He just didn't know how far they'd go. The answer came gradually from 2015 through early 2023, and it was worse than he'd imagined. Starting in 2020, they began making medical appointments for him without asking. Just informed him he had a doctor's appointment and they were taking him. It's just a checkup, Dad. Just routine. We're worried about you. They'd go into the examining room with him, answer questions for him, speak for him, paint a picture of a man who was struggling, forgetting things, not taking care of himself. And when the doctor would look at my grandfather, waiting for him to confirm or deny, he'd just sit there, quiet. Because what was he going to do? Argue with his son in front of the doctor? Make a scene? Prove their point that he was difficult, combative, unstable? So he said nothing, and his silence was taken as confirmation. They were building a medical record, documentation that could be used later. Proof that he was incompetent, evidence for a competency hearing if it came to that. But the truly sinister part was the financial manipulation. My father had access to some of my grandfather's accounts. Not all of them, but some. Joint accounts that had been set up decades ago, back in 2005, for convenience. So my father could help with bills if needed, so he could handle things if my grandfather was traveling or busy. Trust, that's what those accounts represented, parental trust in a son, and they abused it. Starting in 2020, slowly at first, small transfers began. Money moving from my grandfather's accounts to my father's accounts. Justified as helping manage things or consolidating for tax purposes or investing more efficiently. But it was theft, legal theft maybe, since he had authorized access from years ago, but theft nonetheless. My grandfather noticed the account balances decreasing in late 2021. Of course he noticed. He'd been managing money since he was 8 years old. He knew every penny he had, where it was, and what it was doing. But when he asked about it in early 2022, they had explanations. Always explanations. Business reasons, tax strategies, investment opportunities. Dad, you don't need to worry about this stuff. We're handling it. Trust us. We're making your money work better. Making it work better for them is what they meant. And here's the thing that my grandfather, despite his vigilance, didn't fully understand. They weren't just making small transfers. Over time, from 2020 through early 2023, they were systematically draining multiple accounts. My grandfather could see individual accounts decreasing, but he didn't realize until later that it was happening across all the joint accounts simultaneously. That's how they hid the full scope, by spreading the theft across multiple access points. The house started deteriorating. Not badly, not obviously, but maintenance stopped getting done. The gutters needed cleaning, the fence needed repair, the deck needed staining. Small things. Things my grandfather used to do himself but was getting too old for. Things he'd ask my father to help with. Yeah, Dad, we'll get to it. We're just really busy right now with the business. But they were never too busy to come by and discuss his future living arrangements or to walk through the house planning their renovations. They didn't want to maintain his house. They wanted him out of it. The final stage of disrespect came in the form of control. They started making decisions for him, not with him, for him. In 2021, they switched his internet provider without asking. Better deal, Dad. We're saving you money. They changed his phone plan. This one's easier for you, more minutes. In 2022, they replaced his old truck. It was falling apart, Dad. We got you something safer, more reliable. Never mind that he'd loved that truck. Had driven it for 15 years. It was his. They were erasing him bit by bit, replacing his choices with theirs, making him a passenger in his own life. And the worst part? My father went along with all of it. The son my grandfather had sacrificed everything for, the boy he'd raised, the man he'd funded and supported and loved unconditionally. That man now saw him as a problem to be solved, an asset to be acquired, an obstacle to be removed. Every time my grandfather looked at his son, he must have wondered, where did I go wrong? What did I miss? How did I raise a man who could treat his own father like this? But he didn't go wrong. He'd done everything right, loved completely, gave unconditionally, sacrificed endlessly. He just didn't account for her. The poison she'd dripped in his son's ear, the greed she'd nurtured, the entitlement she'd cultivated, she'd turned his son against him. Not quickly, not obviously, but methodically, strategically, until the man who'd once hugged his father and thanked him for everything now looked at him like a burden. The family dinners stopped entirely. They never came to visit, just to visit anymore, only when they wanted something, only when they needed to check on their investment, only when they were managing their future inheritance. Holidays became transactions. Christmas was them showing up for an hour, dropping off an impersonal gift card, eating food my grandfather had prepared, hoping for family time, then leaving early because they had other commitments. His birthday, a phone call. Maybe. Sometimes they forgot entirely, but their birthday's their anniversary. He was expected to remember, expected to send money, expected to be generous, because that's what grandfathers do, right? They give, they provide, they sacrifice, but they never give back, they never reciprocate, they never honor the man who made their lives possible. Now, I need to tell you about me, about where I was during all of this, because you're probably wondering, where the hell was the grandson? I'm 33 years old now. In 2025, I was born in 2000. When my mother died in 2012, I was 12. My father got custody, but honestly, after she died, he checked out, buried himself in work. I spent more time with my grandfather than with my father. When I turned 18, in 2018, my grandfather did something that would save his life. 5 years later, he added me as the third trustee to the family trust that held the house, the trust he'd created with my grandmother back in 1998. This house is our family legacy, he told me. Someday it'll be yours, but more importantly, this protects it. No one can sell this house without all three trustees agreeing. Me, your father, and now you. He made me promise to never sign anything about the house without talking to him first. I promised. But here's where I failed him. After I graduated college in 2020, I moved 3 states away for a job. I called my grandfather every week, but I didn't visit as much as I should have. Maybe once every few months. And during those calls, he never told me what was happening, never mentioned the pressure, the manipulation, the theft. He was protecting me, I realize now. Didn't want to put me in the middle, didn't want to force me to choose between him and my father, but I should have known. Should have visited more, should have paid attention to the changes in his voice, the weariness, the hints that things weren't right. I didn't, and I'll regret that forever. The poker game, friends? They knew something was wrong. Ben, Charlie, Lou, Frank, Dave, they'd been playing cards with my grandfather every Thursday night for decades. When he started missing games in 2021, they noticed. When he seemed distracted and tired, when he did show up, they asked questions. "Everything okay, Rich?" Ben would ask. "Fine, fine," my grandfather would say. "Just getting old." But they weren't stupid. They'd seen him interact with my father and that woman at a few community events. Seen the way she talked over him, the way my father let her, the way they treated him like a child. But what could they do? Step into family business? Accuse a man's son of mistreating him without proof? They did what old men do. They kept an eye on him, made sure he knew they were there, made sure he knew he had friends. It wasn't enough, but they tried. Every single day from 2020 through that Tuesday in March 2023, my grandfather felt it. The loneliness, the betrayal, the slow erasure of his existence in his own life, in his own home, in his own family. He'd wake up in the house he'd built and wonder if today would be the day they made their final move. Today would be the day they stopped pretending. Today would be the day they dropped the mask entirely and took what they'd been circling for years. And you know what the worst part was? He still loved them. He still loved his son, still wanted to believe there was good in him, still hoped that somehow the boy he'd raised was still in there somewhere, but that hope was dying, day by day, insult by insult, betrayal by betrayal, until that Tuesday morning in March 2023, when they walked into his house and told him he was being evicted from his own life. That was the day the hope died completely. That was the day my grandfather realized his son was gone, replaced by a stranger who wore his face but had none of his heart. That was the day everything changed. Because my grandfather wasn't a victim. He was a survivor, a fighter, a man who'd been knocked down by life more times than most people could count and had gotten back up every single time. And this time he wasn't just going to get back up. He was going to make sure they never got up again. So there he stood in his own house, being told he had to leave, being told strangers had already made decisions about his life, being told his own son had betrayed him in the most fundamental way possible, and for the next 3 days, they left him alone. Probably thought they were being generous, giving him time to process and accept reality. Time to pack his things like a good little old man and shuffle off to the facility they'd chosen for him. But my grandfather wasn't processing, he wasn't accepting, he was planning. You want to know what those 3 days looked like? Let me tell you, because this is where you start to see who my grandfather really was. Not the tired old man they thought they were dealing with, but the strategist, the survivor, the man who'd been outsmarting life since he was 8 years old. Day 1, Wednesday, he sat in his chair all day, didn't eat much, didn't watch TV, just sat there thinking, going through everything in his mind, every conversation, every document, every transaction, every lie they'd told, every manipulation they'd attempted. He wasn't wallowing, he was cataloging, building a case in his mind. Day 2, Thursday, he started making phone calls, quiet calls, from his cell phone, not the house phone, because he didn't trust that they hadn't found some way to monitor that too. First call was to his lawyer. Yeah, my grandfather had a lawyer. A good one. Tom Hendricks from Hendricks and Associates had used him for decades for business stuff, property stuff, legal stuff. A man he trusted. A man who knew him, a man who would believe him when he explained what was happening. Tom, he said when the lawyer answered, I need to see you. Tomorrow if possible. And I need you to bring every document related to my properties, my accounts, my business interests, everything. The lawyer heard something in his voice, something that made him cancel other appointments, made him clear his schedule, made him understand this was serious. I'll be there at 9 a.m., Tom said. Your place? No, my grandfather said. Your office. I'll come to you. Because his house wasn't safe anymore, wasn't private anymore. They had keys. They walked in whenever they wanted. He needed neutral ground. Second call was to his bank, his personal banker, Linda Martinez, a woman he'd worked with for 20 years. Linda, I need to talk to you about my accounts, all of them. I need printed statements for the last 5 years, every transaction, every transfer, everything. She heard it too. The tone, the urgency, the underlying rage barely contained. Mr. Patterson, is everything all right? No, he said simply. It's not, but it will be. Can you have those ready by tomorrow afternoon? I'll have them ready by noon, she said. Third call was to his accountant, Harold Chen. Same request. Every tax return, every financial document, every piece of paper that showed where his money had been and where it had gone. And then he made one more call. This one was different. This one was to a private investigator, not the TV kind, not some flashy detective with a leather jacket and an attitude, a real one. Rebecca Torres from Torres Investigations, the kind that does background checks and asset searches and finds out things people don't want found. I need you to investigate someone, my grandfather said. Who? My daughter-in-law, Sarah Patterson, maiden name unknown to me. I need to know everything about her, her real background, her finances, her previous relationships, everything. Can you do it? I can do it, Rebecca said. But sir, whatever I find, you might not like it. I already don't like her, my grandfather said. I just need proof of why. And then he made one final call to me. It was Thursday evening. I was in my apartment in Denver just getting home from work. When I saw his name on my phone, I smiled. Our weekly call, though it was coming a day early. Hey, Grandpa, I answered. How are you? I need you to listen to me very carefully, he said, cutting me off. His voice was different, harder, serious in a way I'd never heard before. And I need you not to tell your father that we talked. My stomach dropped. What's wrong? Everything, he said. And then he told me. All of it. The facility, the house sale, the 2 weeks, the fact that they'd already made arrangements without his consent. I was furious. Grandpa, they can't do that. They can't just... They think they can, he said. But they're wrong, and I need your help to prove it. Anything? I said immediately. Whatever you need. Remember when I made you a trustee of the family trust when you turned 18? Of course. I need you to understand something. That trust means they cannot sell this house without your signature. All 3 trustees must agree. Me, your father, and you. Do you understand? Yes. They don't know you're a trustee, he said. Your father was there when we set up the trust back in 1998, but he never paid attention to the details. When I added you in 2018, I had Tom draw up the papers privately. Your father never knew. He assumed it was just me and him. They're going to try to sell the house, I said, understanding dawning. They already have a realtor, my grandfather confirmed. But when they try to finalize the sale, they'll discover they need a 3rd signature. Yours. And that's when their entire plan falls apart. I won't sign, I said immediately, no matter what they say, no matter what pressure they put on me. Good, my grandfather said, but I need more from you. I need you to come home soon, within the week. But don't tell your father, don't tell anyone. I need you here when everything comes to light. I'll request time off tomorrow, I promised. I'll be there by Tuesday. Thank you, he said, and his voice cracked just slightly. Just enough to show how scared he was, how alone he felt. I know I haven't been the best at asking for help. You're my grandfather, I interrupted. You don't have to ask. I should have been there more. I should have seen what was happening. You couldn't have known, he said. I hid it well, but now I need you. Can you be here? I'll be there, I promised. Whatever you need, we'll fight this together. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment, shaking with rage. My father, my own father, was trying to steal from his dad to lock him away, to erase him. I called my boss that night, explained that I had a family emergency, requested 2 weeks off immediately. She approved it without question. I booked a flight for Monday. I'd be there Tuesday morning. Day 3, Friday, my grandfather got up early, showered, shaved, put on his good suit, the one he'd bought for my grandmother's funeral, the one he only wore when things were serious. He looked at himself in the mirror, 78 years old, still strong, still sharp, still here, still fighting. Today, he said to his reflection, we start taking back what's ours. He drove to the lawyer's office, walked in at exactly 9 a.m. Tom was waiting with 3 banker's boxes full of documents. I pulled everything, Tom said. Property deeds, wills, the family trust documents, business documents, powers of attorney, everything in your file going back 40 years. They spread it all out on the conference table, and for the next 4 hours, they went through it, piece by piece, document by document. And that's when my grandfather saw it, the thing he'd suspected but hadn't confirmed, the thing that made his blood run cold and his jaw clench and his hands shake with rage. 2 years ago in 2021, right after the pandemic, when my father and his wife had convinced my grandfather to update his documents for modern times, there had been a power of attorney drawn up, a durable power of attorney, giving my father authority to make financial and medical decisions if my grandfather became incapacitated. My grandfather remembered signing it, remembered my father bringing it over one evening in summer 2021, saying it was just a precaution, just smart planning, just making sure things were organized in case COVID got him, given his age. Everyone should have one, Dad. It's responsible. It protects you. And my grandfather had signed it because he trusted his son, because he believed his son had his best interests at heart, because he never imagined his son would use it against him. But here's what my grandfather had done that his son didn't know about. He'd asked Tom to review it first, and Tom had made a copy for his files, the original copy. Before my grandfather signed it and gave it back to my father, and now 2 years later they were comparing documents. Tom, my grandfather said, his voice deadly calm, pull up the document that's currently on file with the county clerk, the one they submitted last month. Tom pulled it up on his computer, and they compared them side by side. They were different. Someone had altered it after my grandfather signed it, expanded the powers, broadened the authority, changed the language from if incapacitated to if deemed unable to make sound decisions by medical professionals, or if the attorney in fact believes it is in the principal's best interest. That last part, that or if the attorney in fact believes it is in the principal's best interest, that wasn't in the version my grandfather signed. They'd added it, given themselves the power to act not just if he was incapacitated, but whenever they decided it was good for him. Tom, my grandfather said, is this legal? Tom examined both documents carefully, looked at the signatures, the dates, the notary stamps, the modifications. The original document you signed is legal, he said slowly. These modifications? These were added digitally after the fact. The document was scanned, modified, and reprinted. You can see the difference in the paper quality and the signature ink density. This is fraud, document tampering, forgery. Can we prove it? We can prove it, Tom said. We can get a forensic document examiner. We can compare the original I have here with the filed version. We can show this was altered after you signed it. But Richard, this is serious. This is a crime. If we pursue this, your son could face criminal charges. My grandfather sat back in his chair, looked at the ceiling, breathed slowly. His son, the boy he'd raised, the man he'd sacrificed everything for. A criminal, a forger, a fraud. What else? My grandfather asked. What else have they done? They kept going through the documents, and the hits kept coming. Starting in 2020 and continuing through early 2023, there were transfers, multiple transfers from multiple accounts. All the accounts my father had joint access to. 2 years ago, $150,000 from the main investment account. The documentation said it was a loan, but there was no loan agreement, no terms, no repayment schedule, no interest rate, just money. Transferred. Gone. Did you authorize this? Tom asked. No, my grandfather said. I didn't know about it until late 2021 when I noticed that account's balance was much lower than it should be. When I asked him about it, he said it was for a business opportunity, that he'd pay it back with interest, that it would benefit both of us. Has he paid any of it back? Not a penny. Tom made notes, kept digging. There were other transfers, smaller ones, but many of them. $10,000 here, $25,000 there, $30,000 from another account, always with vague descriptions. Family expenses, medical costs, home repairs, investment reallocation. But my grandfather hadn't had any major medical costs, hadn't authorized any major home repairs, hadn't agreed to fund any family expenses, hadn't requested any investment changes. They'd been stealing from him slowly, methodically, draining multiple joint accounts bit by bit across 3 years, thinking he wouldn't notice, thinking he was too old to keep track, thinking he'd just accept their explanations. And here's the thing, he had noticed the individual accounts declining, but they'd been smart. They spread the theft across 6 different accounts. So when one account dropped by $25,000, it didn't look catastrophic. It looked like normal spending or market fluctuations. It was only now, seeing all the transfers from all the accounts together on a timeline, that the full picture emerged. $347,000. That's what Tom calculated. Over 3 years, they'd transferred $347,000 out of my grandfather's various accounts. $347,000. Money my grandfather had earned through decades of hard work. Money he'd saved through sacrifice and discipline. Money that was supposed to last him through retirement, through old age, through whatever came, gone, stolen by his own son. My grandfather stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city below. People going about their lives, working, living, not knowing that in this office, a man was discovering the full depth of his son's betrayal. "I want it back," he said quietly. "Every penny. I want it all back." "We can file suit," Tom said. "We can demand repayment. We can pursue this legally." "No," my grandfather said, turning around. "Not yet. First, I want to know everything. I want to see all of it, every lie, every theft, every manipulation. I want it documented. I want it proven. I want it ironclad. And then I want them destroyed. Not killed, not physically harmed, destroyed legally, financially, socially. He wanted them to lose everything the way they'd try to take everything from him." Tom nodded slowly. "I'll need some time. I'll need to go through everything thoroughly, build the case properly." "Take the time you need," my grandfather said. "But Tom, do it quietly. They can't know we're doing this. They can't suspect anything. They have to think they've won. They have to believe I'm beaten. You're going to pretend to go along with their plan?" "Exactly," my grandfather said. And for the first time in days, he smiled. That same smile from the day they'd told him he was being evicted, the smile that knew things. "I'm going to be the helpless old man they think I am. I'm going to let them believe they've succeeded. And while they're celebrating their victory, we're going to build the case that will bury them." From the lawyer's office, my grandfather went to the bank. Linda had his statements ready. 5 years of transactions, hundreds of pages. Every deposit, every withdrawal, every transfer. He sat in her office and went through them, slowly, carefully, highlighting every transaction he didn't recognize, every transfer he hadn't authorized, every withdrawal that seemed wrong, and there were many, so many. "Linda," he said finally, "these transfers here, here, and here, to my son's account. Do you have records of how they were initiated?" She pulled up the digital files, looked at the authorization forms. "These were done online," she said. "From an account with your username and password. But Mr. Patterson, the IP address shows they were done from a different location than your usual login, and the pattern doesn't match your normal banking behavior. You typically log in Tuesday mornings around 9 a.m. These transactions were done on Fridays around 11 p.m. Can you tell where they came from?" She checked. This IP address corresponds to a commercial building downtown, 445 Market Street. My grandfather knew that address. His son's business office, so they'd stolen his login information, had been accessing his accounts remotely, had been transferring his money while sitting in their office, probably laughing about how easy it was. "I want to change all my passwords," my grandfather said. "Everything. Bank accounts, investment accounts, email, everything. And I want 2-factor authentication on all of it. Can you help me set that up?" "Of course. Linda said. But Mr. Patterson, if someone has been accessing your accounts without authorization, we should report this. This is fraud. This is theft. Not yet, my grandfather said. Soon, but not yet. For now, I just need to secure everything, lock them out, but quietly. I don't want them to know I've done it. Linda looked concerned but nodded. She understood. She'd worked with him long enough to trust his judgment. They spent the next 2 hours changing every password, setting up every security measure, locking down every account. By the time they were done, my father and his wife were completely cut off from my grandfather's money. They just didn't know it yet. Next stop was the accountant. Harold had everything ready. More documents, more evidence, tax returns showing income my grandfather hadn't reported because he hadn't received it. Deductions claimed for business expenses that were actually personal expenses. Forms signed with my grandfather's name but not in his handwriting. They've been committing tax fraud, Harold said bluntly. Using your social security number, filing false returns, claiming deductions for business loans that don't exist. If the IRS finds out about this, you could be held liable. Unless we report them first, my grandfather said. Unless we report them first? Harold agreed. By the time my grandfather got home that Friday evening, he had 3 boxes of evidence in his car. Documents, statements, proof, a paper trail of theft, fraud, forgery, and betrayal. He carried them into his house, down to the basement, into his workshop, the one place they never bothered to go because there was nothing down there they wanted. He locked the door, spread everything out on his workbench, and began organizing it methodically, chronologically, building the case, building the evidence, building the foundation of their destruction. It took him through the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, going through every piece of paper, every transaction, every lie, creating a timeline, creating exhibits, creating a narrative that showed exactly what they'd done and exactly when they'd done it. And while he worked, they called, left messages. Dad, we need to talk about the facility. They need confirmation by Monday. We need to start packing your things. Delete. Dad, the realtor wants to come look at the house Tuesday. Morning. Can we set up a time? Delete. Dad, you're being unreasonable. We're trying to help you. Call us back. Delete. He didn't respond, didn't engage. Let them think he was sulking. Let them think he was defeated. Let them think he was just a stubborn old man who needed more time to accept his fate. On Monday, the private investigator called. Mr. Patterson, I have the preliminary report. I think you should come to my office. This isn't something you want to hear over the phone. My grandfather drove to Rebecca's office, a small place in a professional building. Discreet, professional. Rebecca was a woman in her 50s, former police detective, serious face, sharp eyes. She slid a folder across the desk. Before you open this, she said, I want you to know that I triple-checked everything, every fact, every source, every piece of information. This is solid. This is real. My grandfather opened the folder, and what he read made everything else look like child's play. His daughter-in-law, Sarah Patterson, the woman his son had married, the woman who'd been whispering poison in his ear for 8 years, wasn't who she claimed to be. Her real name wasn't Sarah Mitchell. The maiden name she'd changed it, legally changed it in 2009, 5 years before she met my father. Her real birth name was Sandra Kovacs. Why the change? Because she had a record, a history, a past she'd been hiding. She'd been married twice before, both times to older men, wealthy older men, and both times those marriages had ended with the men dying under suspicious circumstances. First husband, Gerald Hartman, age 67, real estate developer in Arizona. Married in 2006, he died in 2008 of an apparent heart attack. She inherited $2.1 million. There had been an investigation because his children contested the will, but no charges were filed. A second husband, Robert Chen, age 71, retired investment banker in Oregon, married in 2010. He died in 2012 from a fall down the stairs in their home. She inherited $1.4 million plus the house. Again, investigation, but no charges. Case closed as accidental death. Both times, she'd isolated them from their families first. Both times, she'd convinced them to change their wills. Both times, she'd been the primary beneficiary. Both times, there had been suspicious circumstances but not enough evidence to prosecute. Both times, she'd walked away rich and free, and then she'd changed her name, moved to a new state, and started over. That's when she met my father in 2014. Mr. Patterson, Rebecca said quietly, I think your son is in danger. I think you're in danger. This woman is a predator. She's done this before, and I think she's planning to do it again. My grandfather's hands shook as he read through the report. Police reports from Arizona and Oregon, death certificates, interviews with family members of the previous husbands who all said the same things. She isolated him. She convinced him his family was against him. She took control of everything, and then he died. The pattern was identical. Exactly what she was doing to his son, exactly what she was trying to do to him. Does my son know any of this? My grandfather asked. I doubt it, Rebecca said. She's very good at hiding her past. She uses different names. She moves to different states. She reinvents herself completely. Your son probably has no idea who he's really married to. My grandfather closed the folder, sat back in his chair, and the full magnitude of what he was dealing with hit him. This wasn't just greed. This wasn't just a gold digger who wanted his money. This was someone who'd killed before, someone who would kill again, someone who saw human beings as resources to be exploited and discarded. And his son was married to her, living with her, trusting her, completely under her control. I need copies of this, my grandfather said, multiple copies, and I need you to keep a copy somewhere safe, somewhere they can't get to it. Already done, Rebecca said. I keep everything in a secure cloud storage and a safe deposit box. But Mr. Patterson, I think you should go to the police. If this woman is planning something, if she's a threat, they need to know. They'll need more than suspicion, my grandfather said. They'll need proof, evidence, something concrete. Right now, all we have is a pattern, a history. Previous husbands died, but nothing was proven. That's not enough to arrest her or protect my son. So what are you going to do? I'm going to give her exactly what she wants, my grandfather said. I'm going to appear weak, vulnerable, easy. I'm going to let her think she's won. And while she's getting comfortable, while she's making her moves, I'm going to be watching, documenting, recording, building a case, not just for theft, but for everything. That's dangerous, Rebecca said. Yes, my grandfather agreed. It is, but I'm not going to let my son die. I'm not going to let this woman destroy what's left of my family. Even if my son has betrayed me, even if he's chosen her over me, he's still my son, and I'm going to save him, whether he wants to be saved or not. That Monday evening, my grandfather finally called them back. All right, he said when my father answered. His voice was perfect, tired, defeated, resigned. I'll do it. I'll go to the facility. I'll sell the house. I'll do whatever you want. Silence on the other end. Shock. They hadn't expected him to give in. They'd expected more fight, more resistance. Dad, I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, my father said. But his voice was cautious, suspicious even, like he couldn't believe it was this easy. I'm old, my grandfather said, injecting weariness into his voice. Defeat, resignation. I'm tired. I don't have the energy to fight anymore. You're right. You've been right all along. I need help. I need care. I can't do this on my own anymore. He could practically hear them smiling through the phone. Hear, them congratulating themselves. Hear her in the background, probably pumping her fist in victory. We'll come over tomorrow, my father said. Start making arrangements. Start packing. The facility has confirmed the room will be ready 2 weeks from now, March 20th. That should give us enough time to get everything sorted. 2 weeks, my grandfather repeated. That should be fine. Dad, I'm proud of you for making this decision. This is the right thing. You'll see. You're going to be so much happier. I'm sure I will be, my grandfather said. Lies, all lies, but they believed them because they wanted to believe them, because they'd already spent his money in their minds, already renovated his house in their imaginations, already moved on to the next phase of their plan. He hung up, sat in his chair, looked around his house, the house he'd built, the house he was pretending to give up, and he smiled, that smile again, that knowing smile. 2 weeks, he said to himself. You've got 2 weeks to think you've won. 2 weeks to get comfortable, 2 weeks to make your fatal mistakes. And my grandson will be here to help me finish this. The next morning, Tuesday, they showed up at his house, bright and early. She was carrying a notepad, a planning binder, color-coded tabs. She'd probably been working on this for weeks, months maybe, planning the liquidation of his life. Good morning, Dad, she chirped. False brightness, artificial cheer. We're so excited to help you with this transition. It's going to be wonderful. You'll see. My grandfather played his part perfectly, shuffled a little when he walked, let his shoulders slump, looked tired, looked defeated, looked like exactly what they wanted him to be, a broken old man who'd given up. Where should we start? He asked weakly. Let's start with what you want to take with you, she said, already walking through the house like she owned it. The facility room is small. You can't take much, just essentials, personal items, some clothes, maybe a few photographs. A few photographs. 80 years of life reduced to a few photographs. What about my furniture? He asked. My books? My tools? We'll handle all that, my father said. We'll sort through everything, decide what's worth keeping, what should be sold, what should be donated. Worth keeping. They'd decide. Not him, not the man who owned it all. Them. What about Mom's things? My grandfather asked quietly. Her jewelry? Her wedding ring? Her china? A look passed between them, a quick glance, a calculation. We'll keep those in the family, my father said. Make sure they're safe. Safe. In their possession, under their control, to be sold or kept as they saw fit. My grandfather nodded slowly. Okay. Whatever you think is best. Why don't you go pack some clothes? She suggested. We'll start going through the rest of the house, make lists, take inventory of his possessions, of his life, of everything he'd worked for. He went upstairs to his bedroom, the room he'd shared with my grandmother for 50 years, the room where she'd died in his arms, the room that held more memories than they could ever understand. And from upstairs, he could hear them walking through his house, opening drawers, rifling through cabinets, discussing values, discussing prices, discussing what they were going to do with everything. Now, here's what I need to tell you about recording laws. Because my grandfather was smart enough to know he needed to be careful. In our state, we have what's called one-party consent recording laws. That means if you're part of a conversation, you can record it without telling the other person. My grandfather was in his own house, in the conversations. He had every legal right to record what was being said in his own home when he was present. He'd already consulted with Tom about this. Made sure it was legal, made sure it would be admissible in court. So that Tuesday morning, my grandfather had a small digital recorder in his shirt pocket, modern, high quality, voice activated, capturing every word, every plan, every piece of evidence they were stupidly speaking out loud. He came downstairs slowly after about 30 minutes, and they were in the kitchen now, thinking he was upstairs and couldn't hear, speaking more freely. Definitely need to update the kitchen before we list it, she was saying. New appliances, maybe new countertops. We could probably get another $50,000 if we do it right. That's smart, my father said. What about the land? Should we subdivide it? 5 acres. We could split it into 2 lots. Maybe, or sell it all to a developer. They'd pay premium for this location. When do you think until... A pause. My grandfather, standing in the hallway, held his breath. He's 78, she said carefully. These facilities, they're not known for extending lifespans. The medication they use to keep residents calm, well, a year, maybe 2 at most. And honestly, at his age, with some encouragement, things could move faster. What do you mean, encouragement? My father asked. I mean, we make sure he takes all his medications, she said, and my grandfather could hear the smile in her voice. Maybe accidentally gets confused about dosages. Maybe develops some complications. These things happen in facilities. Old people die all the time. No one questions it. There it was. Not just theft, not just fraud, murder, premeditated murder. She was planning to kill him once he was in the facility. Make it look like natural causes or medication error, just like she'd done to her previous husbands. And his son was listening, considering, not stopping her. We have to be careful, my father said slowly. We can't. Nothing obvious. Of course not, she said. I've done this before. I know how to be careful. My grandfather's blood ran cold. She just admitted it. Admitted to killing before. Admitted her plan. And his, son was going along with it. He cleared his throat loudly, making noise as he came around the corner into the kitchen. They both jumped, guilty expressions flashing across their faces before they rearranged them into fake smiles. Dad, we were just discussing the timeline, my father said quickly. I'm very tired, my grandfather said. This is all very overwhelming. I think I need to rest. Of course, Dad, she said, all sweetness again. You rest. We'll come back tomorrow. Keep working on things. They left, finally, and my grandfather immediately went to his workshop, downloaded the audio to his computer, made multiple copies, sent one to Tom immediately with a message. Urgent. Listen to this. Call me. Tom called within 20 minutes. Richard, this is a confession to conspiracy to commit murder, Tom said, his voice shaken. This woman just admitted to killing her previous husbands. And your son, Richard, your son is now an accessory. I know, my grandfather said quietly. What do? We go to the police. Today, right now. This is beyond civil matters. This is criminal conspiracy, attempted murder. She's a serial killer. Will they believe us? Will this recording be enough? Combined with the private investigator's report about her previous husbands? Yes. This is enough to open a criminal investigation at minimum. Possibly enough for arrest warrants. Do it, my grandfather said. But, Tom, save my son if you can. She's the predator. She's the killer. He's weak. He's greedy. He's betrayed me. But I don't want him in prison for the rest of his life. I'll do what I can, Tom promised. But Richard, he participated in that conversation. He didn't stop her. He didn't object to murdering you. That makes him complicit. I know, my grandfather said. I know, but he's still my son. That Tuesday afternoon, my grandfather and Tom went to the police. Not just any police. They went to the district attorney's office, brought everything. The private investigator's report on Sarah's previous marriages and name change, the recording from that morning, the documentation of the theft, the forged power of attorney. They met with Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh. She listened to the recording 3 times, read through Rebecca Torres's investigation report, looked at the pattern of deaths in Arizona and Oregon. This is enough for a warrant, she said. We're going to need to contact authorities in Arizona and Oregon, reopen those death investigations. But based on this recording alone, we have probable cause for conspiracy to commit murder. What about my son? My grandfather asked. He's implicated, A.D. Walsh said carefully. He participated in a conversation about killing you and didn't object. That makes him an accessory before the fact at minimum. But if he cooperates, if he testifies against her, we might be able to work out a deal. Reduce charges in exchange for testimony. Do whatever you can, my grandfather said. Please? I need to ask you something, Walsh said. Are you willing to continue with your plan, to pretend to go along with them? We'll need more evidence, recordings of future conversations, documentation of them actually moving forward with the facility placement, building the case stronger. How long? My grandfather asked. A week, maybe less. We move fast on murder conspiracies, but we need to be thorough, make sure the case is airtight. My grandfather thought about it. One more week of pretending, of playing weak, of letting them think they'd won. I'll do it, he said, but I want protection. I want someone watching my house. I want to make sure she doesn't try anything before you arrest her. Done, Walsh said. We'll have unmarked surveillance starting tonight. And Mr. Patterson, you're very brave. Most people wouldn't have the courage to do what you're doing. I'm not brave, my grandfather said. I'm just a man trying to survive. That evening I arrived, flew in from Denver, rented a car, drove straight to my grandfather's house. It was Tuesday evening around 7 p.m. when I knocked on his door. When he opened it and saw me, his face crumpled. Relief, gratitude, love. He pulled me into a hug and I felt him shake. Thank you for coming, he whispered. Always, I said, always. We sat at his kitchen table and he told me everything, played me the recordings, showed me all the evidence, explained the police involvement, the plan to continue the charade for one more week. I was furious, sickened. My father had agreed to murder, to killing his own father for money, and that woman, that monster, had done this before. What do you need from me? I asked. The trust documents, he said. They're going to try to sell the house soon, probably in the next few days. They'll bring papers for me to sign, and that's when they'll discover they need a third signature, yours. And then everything falls apart, he said, because you'll refuse, and they'll realize they can't sell the house, can't access that equity, can't complete their plan, and that's when they'll either back off or show their true desperation. I won't sign, I promised, not ever. I know, he said. That's why I made you a trustee. That's why I protected us both. Over the next few days, Wednesday through Friday of that week, they came every day, and every day they got more brazen, more open, more careless. They started taking things, small things at first, a silver picture frame, my grandmother's decorative bowl, an antique clock, things they thought my grandfather wouldn't notice or wouldn't care about, but he noticed, and he photographed everything, before and after, building evidence, documentation of theft. They brought the realtor, a smiling woman named Patricia Hughes with business cards and a tablet full of comparable sales. They walked through the house discussing staging, discussing marketing, discussing closing dates. While my grandfather sat in his chair, quiet, watching, recording on his phone now because Patricia was there, and it was his house, and he had every right to record what happened in his own home. Patricia left brochures listing agreements, preliminary paperwork. We'll need all the property owners to sign, Patricia explained. Is it just you, Mr. Patterson? The house is in a family trust, my father said smoothly. But Dad has full authority. We'll take care of the paperwork. Patricia nodded, accepting this. She didn't know any better, had no reason to doubt it. After she left, my grandfather played confused. I thought your mother and I set up that trust together, he said, scratching his head like he couldn't quite remember. Back in the 90s? You did, Dad, my father said patiently, like talking to a child. But Mom passed away, remember? So now it's just you and me managing things. Oh, my grandfather said. Right, I forgot? He hadn't forgotten, but they thought he had, thought he was getting confused. Perfect. Thursday, they brought papers, transfer documents, facility admission forms, financial power of attorney confirmations, everything designed to hand control of his life over to them. We just need your signature, Dad, my father said, on these documents, and then everything's taken care of. Everything is handled. My grandfather looked at the papers, dozens of pages, small print, legal language, all designed to transfer his property, his money, his autonomy, his life to them. And he did something brilliant, something that would protect him legally. I should probably have my lawyer look at these first, he said slowly. Tom always told me never to sign anything without having him review it. Panic flashed across their faces. Dad, these are standard forms, my father said quickly. We've already had our lawyer review them. They're fine. Still, my grandfather said stubbornly, Tom's my lawyer. I trust him. I'd feel better if he looked at them. Dad, we don't have time for this, she said, irritation bleeding through. The facility needs these signed by tomorrow. They have deadlines. Then they'll have to wait, my grandfather said. I'm not signing anything without Tom reviewing it first. You taught me that, remember? He looked at his son. You always said, never sign anything without your lawyer. Remember? My father did remember. He'd said that many times over the years, his own advice now being used against him. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. We'll come back tomorrow after your lawyer looks at them. They left, angry, frustrated, sensing somehow that things weren't going according to plan, but not understanding why. Friday morning, March 17th, it all came crashing down. They arrived early 8 a.m. expecting to get the signatures and move forward, but this time they weren't alone. Tom was there. Tom Hendricks, my grandfather's lawyer, sitting at the kitchen table with a briefcase full of documents. And I was there. Standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, staring at my father. What's he doing here? My father asked, looking at me. I invited him, my grandfather said calmly. He's family. He should be part of this. We need to discuss this privately, Dad, she said, her eyes narrowing at my presence. Anything you say to me, you can say in front of my grandson and my lawyer, my grandfather said. Now, shall we discuss these documents? They sat down reluctantly. Tom spread out the papers they'd brought the day before. I've reviewed these, Tom said, and I have some concerns. Mr. Patterson, do you understand that by signing these documents, you're giving your son complete control over your finances, your medical decisions, and authorization to sell your property? That's the point, my father said. We're helping him. I'm asking my client, Tom interrupted. Mr. Patterson? I understand, my grandfather said, and I've decided I'm not comfortable signing them. Silence, shock, anger dawning on their faces. Dad, we've been through this, my father started. I've changed my mind, my grandfather said simply. I don't want to go to the facility. I don't want to sell my house. I want to stay here. You can't do this, she said, standing up. We've already made arrangements, already paid deposits, already spent my money in your mines, my grandfather asked quietly. Already planned my funeral? Something in his voice made them freeze. What are you talking about? My father asked. Tom, my grandfather said. Show them. Tom pulled out documents. The forensic analysis of the power of attorney showing it had been altered, the bank statements showing all the unauthorized transfers, the IP address logs, the timeline of theft. Over the past 3 years, you've stolen $347,000 from your father, Tom said calmly. You've forged legal documents, you've committed tax fraud, and he pulled out another document. You've been planning his murder. He pressed play on a small speaker, the recording from Tuesday. Their voices clear as day, discussing how long my grandfather would live in the facility, her talking about encouragement and medication confusion, her admitting she'd done this before. The color drained from both their faces. That's illegal, she stammered. You can't record people without their knowledge. Actually, Tom said, in this state, one-party consent is sufficient. Mr. Patterson was present for the conversation in his own home, completely legal and completely admissible in court. This is entrapment, my father said desperately. You tricked us. You can't entrap someone into committing crimes they were already committing, Tom said. The theft was ongoing for 3 years before this recording. The forgery happened 2 years ago. The murder conspiracy was your wife's idea, not his. You just got caught. We should go, she said, standing up quickly. We don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do, a new voice said from the doorway. We all turned. Ada Jennifer Walsh walked in, followed by 2 police detectives. Sarah Patterson, also known as Sarah Mitchell, birth name Sandra Kovach. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, theft by deception, forgery, and fraud. We also have warrants from Arizona and Oregon regarding the deaths of Gerald Hartman and Robert Chen. She ran, actually tried to run, made it to the back door before one of the detectives caught her. They cuffed her while she screamed about her rights, about entrapment, about illegal recordings. None of it mattered. The evidence was solid. The case was airtight. My father just sat there, frozen, watching his wife being arrested, watching his whole world collapse. Mr. Patterson, Ada Walsh said to my father, you're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to theft, and fraud. However, we're prepared to offer you a deal if you cooperate fully. What kind of deal? He asked numbly. You testify against your wife about everything, the theft, the murder conspiracy, her admissions about her previous husbands, and in exchange, we reduce the charges. Probably felony theft and fraud, probation instead of prison time. But you lose everything, the business, the properties, all of it goes to repaying your father. My father looked at my grandfather, really looked at him, and maybe finally saw what he'd done, what he'd become. I'm sorry, he whispered. Dad, I'm so sorry. You should have thought of that before you tried to kill me, my grandfather said coldly. They took my father away in handcuffs, not as roughly as they took Sarah because he didn't resist. Just went quietly, broken, and then it was over. The house was quiet, just me, my grandfather, and Tom. It's done, Tom said quietly. They're in custody. The DA has everything she needs. You're safe now. My grandfather nodded slowly, and then, for the first time since this all started, he cried. Real tears, deep sobs, the kind of grief that comes from losing a child. Not to death, but to something worse, to choice, to betrayal, to the death of who they could have been. I held him while he cried, let him grieve, let him feel the weight of everything he'd survived, everything he'd lost, everything that could never be repaired. The legal proceedings took months. Sarah fought everything, hired expensive lawyers with money she'd stolen from previous victims, claimed she was innocent, claimed my grandfather had dementia and had fabricated everything, claimed the recordings were fake. None of it worked. The forensic evidence was undeniable. The Arizona and Oregon police reopened the investigations into her previous husband's deaths. Found evidence they'd missed the first time, suspicious insurance claims, altered medications, patterns of behavior. She was charged with 2 counts of murder in the first degree, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder in our state. Multiple counts of theft, fraud, and forgery across 3 states. Her trial was set for January 2024. My father took the deal, pleaded guilty to felony theft and fraud, got 3 years probation, community service, and full restitution ordered, every penny of the $347,000 plus interest, plus legal fees, plus damages. Total amount ordered $512,000. He didn't have it. His business collapsed once word got out about what he'd done. Clients left, properties were sold, partners disappeared. Everything he'd built with my grandfather's help evaporated. The court set up a payment plan, 25% of his gross income garnished directly from his paychecks. At his current income working as an assistant property manager for someone else, it would take him 37 years to pay it back. He'd be 81 years old. My grandfather would be 115. Neither would live to see it fully resolved. But that wasn't the point. The point was justice, accountability, consequences. Sarah's trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, the recordings, the investigator's report, testimony from families of the previous husbands, medical experts about the suspicious circumstances of the deaths, financial experts about the theft patterns. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole for the first-degree murder charges. Additional consecutive sentences for the attempted murder and fraud charges. She'd die in prison. Exactly what she deserved. 2 years have passed since that Friday in March 2023. It's now March 2025. My grandfather is 80 years old, still in his house, still in his chair by the window, still watching that oak tree he planted 54 years ago. But everything else has changed. The house feels different now. Lighter somehow, like a weight has been lifted from the walls, like the oppression that had been settling over it for years has been scrubbed away. It's his again, fully his. No one walking through making plans, no one calculating its value, no one treating it like an asset to be liquidated. It's a home again, not a target. He's made changes, small ones, meaningful ones. Painted the bedroom a different color. The one he'd shared with my grandmother, kept her memory but made it his own space too. Added a reading nook by the window, put up new photos, created something that honored the past but didn't live in it. He finally cleaned out the garage, not because someone told him it was too messy, but because he wanted to. Organized his tools the way he liked them, set up his woodworking station properly, started taking on small projects again, building things, creating things, doing what he loved. He built a bench for the garden, beautiful oak with a brass plaque that read, "In memory of Margaret, she made everything beautiful, my grandmother, his wife, his partner." He volunteers 3 days a week now at the Legal Aid Clinic, at the Senior Fund Center, at community organizations that help the elderly. He's become something of a local advocate, the man who fought back, the man who won, the man who proved that age doesn't equal powerlessness. People call him for advice. Seniors who suspect their kids are stealing from them, elderly folks whose families are trying to force them into homes, older adults who feel controlled, manipulated, erased. And my grandfather listens, advises, helps, connects them with lawyers, teaches them what he learned. He's saved 9 families in 2 years, 9 elderly people who were being exploited by their own children, helped them protect their assets, their homes, their autonomy, their dignity. He doesn't do it for recognition, doesn't do it for praise, does it because he knows what it feels like, knows the betrayal, knows the pain, knows the helplessness of watching your own family try to destroy you. And he's turned that pain into purpose, that trauma into triumph, that victimization into victory for others. The local newspaper did a story on him last spring. Local man stops. Elder abuse ring helps others do the same. They interviewed him, asked him about his experience, about what happened to him. He told them everything, named names. The case was public record. And at the end of the article, he said something that became a rallying cry. Age is not weakness. Gray hair is not incompetence. And being someone's parent doesn't make you their property. We built the world these kids inherited. We earned everything we have. And we have every right to protect it, to keep it, to live our lives on our terms until our last breath. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you're too old to fight back. You're not. You're experienced, you're wise, you're strong, and you're worthy of respect, not exploitation. The article went viral, shared thousands of times. Elder advocacy groups used it in their materials. Senior centers hung it on their walls. It became a movement, and my grandfather became the face of that movement, not because he sought it out, but because his story resonated, because every elderly person who read it saw themselves, saw their fears, saw their situation, and saw hope that they could survive it too. He started getting invited to speak at senior centers, at legal conferences, at churches and community centers, anywhere people gathered who cared about protecting the elderly. And he went every invitation he could manage, standing up in front of rooms full of people and telling his story: the betrayal, the theft, the murder conspiracy, the fight back, the victory. And then he'd tell them how to protect themselves. Get your documents in order. Know what you have and where it is. Have a trusted advocate who's not financially connected to your estate. A grandchild, a niece, a nephew, a close friend. Use two-factor authentication on everything. Never give anyone power of attorney without understanding exactly what powers you're granting, and have your lawyer review it first. Don't add anyone to your accounts or your deeds without independent legal advice. Know your state's recording laws. In one-party consent states, you can record conversations you're part of. And most importantly, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If someone is isolating you from others, controlling your information, making decisions without you, those are red flags. Don't ignore them. Act on them. He'd hand out information packets, resources, names of lawyers who specialized in elder law, contact information for adult protective services, hotlines for financial abuse, everything someone would need if they found themselves in his situation. And people listened, really listened, because he wasn't some lecturer or expert talking in abstracts. He was someone who'd lived it, survived it, won. His testimony helped change laws. State legislators invited him to speak about elder financial abuse, about the need for stronger protections, better oversight, harsher penalties for family members who exploit their elderly relatives. 3 bills passed directly because of his advocacy, requiring banks to flag suspicious transfer patterns on elderly customers' accounts, mandatory forensic comparison of any power of attorney documents that have been amended after initial signing, increasing criminal penalties for financial exploitation of the elderly by family members. He stood in the state capitol when the governor signed them in November 2024, watched them become law, watched his pain become protection for others, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years: pride, purpose, peace. But it wasn't all advocacy and activism. It was also about rebuilding his personal life, the life that had been slowly suffocated by their presence and their schemes. He reconnected with old friends. The poker game restarted. Ben, Charlie, Lou, Frank, Dave. They welcomed him back without judgment. Just friendship. Genuine, uncomplicated friendship. Every Thursday night, sitting around his dining room table, playing cards, telling lies, laughing at jokes that weren't that funny but were hilarious because of who was telling them. That's what they'd taken from him. Not just money, not just security, but joy, connection, community, life. And he was taking it all back, reclaiming every piece of himself that they'd tried to diminish. He started dating. Yeah, at 80 years old, my grandfather started dating. Met a woman at the senior center. Dorothy Chen, no relation to Sarah's deceased husband Robert Chen, just a coincidence that made them both laugh when they realized it. Dorothy is 76, widow. Sharp sense of humor, kind eyes, no agenda except companionship. They went to movies, had dinners, took walks, talked for hours about everything and nothing. She knew his story. He knew hers. Her husband had died of actual natural causes 5 years ago, heart disease. They were both people who'd lost things, survived things, and decided to keep living anyway. It wasn't the same as what he'd had with my grandmother. Couldn't be, wouldn't be. But it was good, real, honest, and it made him happy. Made him remember that life wasn't over just because he was old. Wasn't over just because he'd been betrayed. Wasn't over just because his son had broken his heart. Life kept going, and he was going to live it fully, joyfully, defiantly. The financial situation resolved exactly as ordered. Every month,